Just look at the case of Syria. Remember what Syria once was? Before the war, Syria had a nicely balanced economy. It produced most of its own industrial goods, produced its fuel and agricultural products, had very little poverty and enjoyed thriving trade, and it was financially responsible. It had enjoyed 40 years of peace with Israel, and the constitution drafted under President Assad guarantees equal rights for women, and importantly, it guarantees religious freedom in 3 different parts of the text. I've read it. Syria is a model for other Arab states, especially ones like Saudi Arabia, which have no constitution at all. We call Syria's president a dictator, but in 2014, he was overwhelmingly elected by the people of Syria in a fair and free election. It was very heavily monitored. There were lots of observers, all agreed that it had been a true and valid election. So Syria is a model of elective democracy, if you want to call it that, for the Arab world. But the Americans pretend that the election never happened. And yet many Syrians who spent 15 hours in the blazing sun so that they could vote for President Assad were targeted and killed by US-backed rebels who fired mortars into their midst and killed them. Now, after 10 years of war, I think it's important to recognize, after 10 years of war, not a single rebel leader has ever emerged as a popular figure. With the West loves the terrorist that the people of Syria despise. You know, we're taught to hate President Assad because he cracked down on rioters in 2011, and they say that he gassed his people. But that's not true, because we decided to attack Syria 10 years before all of that. In 2001, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld ordered the Pentagon to draft plans to overthrow 7 countries in the Mideast, beginning with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with Iran. Not one of them had harmed the United States. In 2006, the US Embassy in Damascus drew up detailed plans to destabilize and overthrow Syria. Those were widely disseminated to the Pentagon, to various unified commands. They went to NATO. They went widely across the world. The specific plans to destabilize and overthrow Syria, and that was long before any demonstrations had ever occurred in Syria. And yet we claim them as the reason that we opposed President Assad. In March of 2011, the United States, UK, and France attacked and overthrew Libya. They brutally executed Colonel Gaddafi. The US then turned over control of a Libyan airfield to the Turks, who used it to transport advanced weapons that had been plundered from Libya and send them eventually to supply the terrorists that were organizing in Syria. In 2011, also during the Arab Spring, the highly secretive Central Intelligence Agency Special Activities Center sent paramilitary teams into the sovereign territory of Syria to identify, train, equip, and lead terrorists to overthrow the Syrian government. In 2013, Barack Obama formalized this long-standing support for anti-Syrian terrorists by secretly authorizing CIA program Timber Sycamore. Under program Timber Sycamore, the CIA's Special Operations Division trained, armed, and paid thousands of terrorists to fight against Syria. Those armies totally under our control. And in one case, a group in Aleppo, we had paid over 1,000 of their people salaries, given them arms, given them training. And it wasn't until they kidnapped a small Palestinian boy who was being treated in a hospital. They kidnapped him, they took him to the central square in Aleppo. And in order to terrorize the people into not fleeing Aleppo, which was being cordoned off by Syrian troops, they took him to the center in a pickup truck. They grabbed the little boy by the hair, they took a knife and they slashed his head off. And then they paraded it, they held it up and waved it in front of the crowd as a warning. Don't escape from Aleppo. We paid the salaries of every man who held that boy's head aloft. We gave them their weapons, we gave them their truck, we gave them everything that they needed. And it was only after that very gruesome incident that we decided, well, that's an embarrassment, we better not pay them. We have been paying terrorists like this throughout the war. NATO and the United States have maintained an intense propaganda campaign against Syria from the outset. Sarin gas attacks that killed civilians were blamed on President Assad. But not one reporter ever asked why Assad would use gas against children, but not against armies of terrorists bearing down on the capital of Damascus. The reason is obvious. There is no answer for that. And the journalists are smart enough to know that if they ask that question, their career in journalism is finished.